Hey folks, remember back when it was late April? I don't remember, April, May, it was such a ridiculously cold spring. And it's still nothing to brag about. We're still getting down in the 40s, low 40s at night here, and it's June 9th. But remember, I took the digging fork and all of our raised beds that weren't frozen, I turned the leaves into the soil, that 2 to 3 inch layer of chopped leaves that I put in last fall to cover the beds, and once the ground thawed, I turned them in to feed the worms and kickstart the growing season. Well, so all of these beds are planted now, and I want to show you how I do it, how I direct seed into chopped leaves. I have 2 beds over here that we're going to plant. So I have Swiss chard, beets, carrots, onions. I was lazy this year. I just used sets, but I started those from sets and they're up running good. Potatoes, only about 3 pounds of seed potatoes in this little 8x3 bed. Remember, this was the one in the last video that the cap was all rotted out. Well, I built a new one out of cedar. It should last, well, long enough for me. So let's take a look at these beds over here and I'll show you what happened since the last video. So the leaves that I turned in with the digging fork, for the most part, are gone. There were still some leaves that were left on the surface, mostly that had blown into the corners, and I raked those off and just temporarily threw them on top of that raised bed. But I want to show you what happens, what these earthworms have done. They've basically eaten themselves out of a home, because there's really nothing much left for them to eat here right now. But let's zoom in here and just take a look at this soil. Okay, so this was full of leaves a month ago. And look at it now. The worms have pretty much devoured the leaves, and these worms, although they're just earthworms, they are short, they are so fat. And you know, they're still in here in abundance, but we're going to have to feed them some more if we want to keep them working for us. So I will show you, yeah, just look at this. Look at how nice and friable, how beautiful this soil is. Putting worms to work. All right, I'll show you how I plant these now. This is a bed of Swiss chard that was planted. So what I did is I removed the leaf residue that was still on the surface pretty much, and then I took one of these pieces of corner bead. Now this corner bead is what drywall installers use on the outside corners of sheetrock, and I use it for my circling stoppers if you look at my videos about container gardening. So what I do is I invert these and I make a little furrow in the soil with the pointed end, and I use that as a guide, and I use a little hand seeder, and I lay my seeds the best I can down that row, and then I take the piece of corner bead and lay it on top of those newly planted seeds, and I do that in 6 rows in my 8-foot beds, 8x4, and then I will take chopped leaves and put them back between these rows. So now this has been, I don't know, 6 days or so, and I can zoom in here, but you can see I have good germination down a row. So I think these plants are, these little seedlings are well enough established now that they can push their way through the little bit of leaf residue. So it won't be too long and I'll have nice rows of plants with chopped leaves in between, and then we can add more chopped leaves as the plants get established and the worms consume them. Works pretty slick. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take all of these off. Now a couple of these I cut a foot off the end so I can use this as my kind of my inspection piece, so I can lift these on the ends and see what how they're germinating, what their progress is, so I don't have to lift the whole corner bead. But I've got good enough germination. That end, I don't know, that was down in the leaves a little too much, I guess. But I need these to plant my beans, so I'm going to take them now. Just keep them watered. I think they'll push through well enough. Then I'll do the same with the beets over here. The carrots I think I'll leave go a few more days. The nice thing about these corner beads, they're perforated, so you get decent amount of sunlight through them. So when you lift them up, they're not all yellow and anemic. They're nice and green and healthy looking. So we'll go plant some beans. Now it's important to level your garden bed fairly level, because when you lay the corner bead, if there are too many dips, it won't be in contact with the soil everywhere. So again, like what I said is I'll start one right here. You can probably see a little better. But I just take it with the pointy end down and I will make a line, and then I will take my seeds and I'm going to plant about every 3 inches. Just push them down. I'm not going to make you watch me do this whole thing, but you get the idea. And then once I have my row of seeds, I will put my protective cover over them. We'll add chopped leaves. And then the nice thing about beans is they're tough enough, robust enough, they'll just lift that corner bead right up off the ground. So we don't have to carefully remove this stuff. Plants will lift it up, and then it's time to take it off, and then away they go. So I'll get this all planted and I'll show you the next step. I just did 5 rows because I didn't have enough seed, and I didn't do them 3 inches apart. Like I said, they're more like 5 inches apart. They're not the straightest in the world, but oh well. So they're all planted, 5 rows, and now I'm going to take chopped leaves, and these are ones that I had saved back from last fall. Well, all the leaves are from last fall, but we bagged them up. We actually put them around our guest cabin, kind of make a skirt around it in the winter to keep it a little warmer in there. So you can never have too many chopped leaves, so that's what I always say. You know, you want to save them back. So I'm going to just take chopped leaves now and put them between the rows. I want to not smother the corner bead because I want the seedlings, when they germinate, I want them to be able to get a little sunlight. So we'll do that, and then I'll plant that one with the rest of my beans after I pull the corner bead off the beets, so I have more corner bead. And you know, when they tell you planting beans to plant them 18 inches apart, well, that's for till gardening, when you're going to cultivate between the rows and walk between them and all that business. That's not this kind of gardening. This is intensive, very productive gardening, and this will be just a mass of plants. But they do really well. They kind of like each other's company, I think, or something. But as long as the worms are doing their job and keeping that soil incredibly productive, the plants just grow like crazy. It's not square foot gardening because we're not doing a grid and all that business. Planting in rows is the easiest way to plant when we are using chopped leaves. But those rows need only be inches apart. I only got four rows with these before I ran out of seed, and they're like 6 inches apart. But I planted all my bean seeds, 2 packets, so I still have a packet of string beans I'm going to put onto one of our arbors, so we won't have any shortage of beans. But another important step after putting on the chopped leaves is to water them in. It kind of locks them in. It keeps them from blowing away so easily. It just kind of locks them together a little bit and settles them down a little bit, and of course adds some water to your newly planted bean seeds. So, you know, we saw that bed that the worms had eaten virtually all of the leaves that I'd fed to them a month or so ago, a month and a half, whatever it was. So they were hungry, probably getting a little disgruntled, not terribly happy with their conditions. But now they're going to be well watered, and look at all the food they have. So they'll be coming back, bringing their kids, starting new families, and they are going to consume all of these leaves over the course of the summer. So we're going to keep adding more chopped leaves between the rows as the season goes on, and just keep that supply of worms happy. Now I'll take you around and show you what we do with chopped leaves. So these are the 2 we just planted. That's the Swiss chard that we just removed the corner bead from. It doesn't look like much now, but give that a couple weeks and they'll take off. Beets, again, you can barely see them, but there's seedlings down there, right in those furrows where the corner bead was. And again, these are the carrot beds. And the carrots are germinating. I see them underneath there when I take a peek, but it's only been 7 days or so. So that's pretty short time for carrots. So I'm going to let these go for another few days. Just planted scarlet emperor beans in our continuous watering earth boxes. I have another video on how I did that. Again, the onions I started from sets. I started those under corner bead too. They probably didn't need it, but it kept the leaves off of them. But they can kind of bully their way through the leaves. And again, potatoes. And then I want to show you Peg's perennial garden. Vegetable gardens are not the only places where you see the benefits of feeding earthworms chopped leaves. This bed, when we put chopped leaves on here, just a few perennials were just starting to emerge. That's the only fertilizer they get, chopped leaves. Same with these beds right here. This south bed used to just cook in the sun. I always struggled for it to be productive. And now look at it. Since we started using chopped leaves, very little watering, very productive. What a fun way to garden. So, there you have it. That's how I direct seed into chopped leaves using corner bead. Now this stuff, when I bought it back years ago, was about $1.25 a piece. I don't know what it is now. I don't imagine. It's a lot more than that. And so you get a dozen of them. These are 8-foot lengths. And they last you forever. You only use them for they're on for a week or two, and use them a couple times a season and tuck them away in the rafters till next season. So I think it's a slick way to go. And as you can see, you can get a lot of daylight through them. So they're protecting the emerging seedlings, but they're also allowing them to photosynthesize and get some sunlight. So I like it. The growing in chopped leaves is it's just amazing what earthworms can do for us. Now, chopped leaves are so easy to apply throughout the season too. You just bunch them up in your fist, get between the rows. When you get your hands between the rows, then just spring it open and you can distribute a lot of chopped leaves, compact them and put them between the rows real nicely and easily. So it really works well. I talk all about it in the book that I wrote over the winter, Worms in Our Beds, Raised Bed Gardening and Living Soil. And in it, I talk not only about the many virtues of earthworms, but about how we build our raised beds, even how I built these bed caps, which if you're growing crops where you have wildlife like we do, you really almost need them, or a big fence or whatever. But I also talk about how growing in a living soil is really gardening. It's going beyond organic. Now, organic gardening is kind of what we used to do with tillage, and you're adding soil amendments, and you're adding the end product of decomposition. You're adding composted material. With this method of gardening, it's the ongoing process of decomposition that's important. These earthworms are actively adding nutrients and enzymes and microorganisms to the soil as they eat their favorite food, chopped leaves. So I like to say it's growing beyond organic. So until next time is marketing. Oh, I'll put a link to my book below for anyone interested in how we garden. So, till next time is Mark again with Backwood Basics. Let's grow beyond organic together.